Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at a really unique, faith-based framework for understanding modern China, one that sees ancient scripture playing out right in today's headlines.
So how exactly does this work? Well, this whole perspective really hinges on a powerful metaphor, that of a red dragon, which comes straight out of the book of Revelation. We're going to see how this biblical imagery is used to interpret China's entire modern history, and it all kicks off with the Communist Revolution back in 1949.
All right, so where does this whole red dragon narrative actually begin? Well, according to the source material we're looking at, it all starts with one single pivotal moment in history, the founding of the People's Republic of China.
You see, Mao Zedong's victory wasn't just a political shift. According to this framework, it was this massive, seismic ideological one. It basically laid a brand new foundation for the entire nation, and in doing so, it set the stage for a fundamental conflict of worldviews, one that is still playing out to this very day.
And that brings us right to the core of the argument here, what the source calls an ideological collision. Now, it's really important to get this. The source doesn't frame this as just some simple political disagreement. Nope. It's presented as a clash between two fundamentally opposed belief systems. Okay, so let's break that down. On one side, you've got this state-centered atheistic ideology. But on the other side, you have a God-centered worldview that says, according to Genesis 1:27, that human dignity is grounded in being made in God's image. This divide, this is the fundamental tension, the engine that really drives the entire narrative we're exploring today. So in the middle of this huge ideological conflict, how does faith persist? Well, to symbolize that, the source turns to the Gospel of John with that famous line, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." This single verse really becomes a central theme of hope and endurance throughout the whole story.
Okay, but this whole ideological clash, it isn't just about abstract beliefs, right? It also totally shapes how this source interprets China's incredible economic rise. So the question is, how does this framework view the nation's transformation from, a pretty isolated state to the global powerhouse it is today?
And this timeline here really lays out the key moments in that economic opening. You've got Nixon's visit in '72, which kind of cracked the door open, then Deng Xiaoping's reforms in '78, that just blew the doors wide open, and finally joining the World Trade Organization in 2001 really cemented China's place in the global economy.
And the philosophical shift behind all of this, it's captured perfectly in this one famous quote from Deng Xiaoping. "To get rich is glorious." I mean, what a statement. This signaled a huge departure from strict communist doctrine and a big move toward a much more pragmatic economic path.
But according to the source, these economic reforms were a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, yeah, they created unprecedented wealth and opened up markets to the world. But on the other hand, they're also seen as having contributed to a rise in things like corruption and materialism, creating a whole new set of societal challenges.
So, we've talked ideology, we've talked economics, but what about the human cost of all this transformation? This is where the source really sharpens its focus, zeroing in on state control, religious persecution, and the wider geopolitical stakes.
And to really underscore the human cost of that early ideological era under Mao, the source points to a staggering figure: tens of millions of deaths during the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. And it frames this tragedy as a direct consequence of that atheistic, state-centered worldview we were just talking about.
The source also describes how religious persecution has evolved over time. It's not the same as it was. It's moved from that really overt physical destruction of the Cultural Revolution, when religion was completely outlawed, to something much more subtle, a modern form of control that uses advanced digital surveillance to monitor and target unregistered churches. And to illustrate this point even further, the source presents what it calls a tale of two Chinas, drawing a sharp contrast between the mainland and Taiwan. Taiwan, of course, is where the defeated nationalists went, and it's portrayed here as the alternative path, a democratic society that actually supports religious freedom and is home to a vibrant, growing Christian community.
And all of this brings us to the source's call to action, which is rooted right in the book of Hebrews. Remember those in prison, as though in prison with them. It's presented as a very direct instruction, telling believers outside of China to stand in solidarity with those who are facing persecution inside the country.
Okay, so let's start to pull all these threads together. How does this biblical framework really tie China's past, present, and even its future all together? I mean, how does it use Scripture to interpret not just what has already happened, but what might be still to come?
This is where it gets really interesting. The source makes a direct connection between the prophetic imagery of Revelation 13 and a very, very modern concern, the use of digital surveillance for mass social control. So, in this view, this ancient text is actually seen as a prophecy of 21st century technology.
And so, the source's final theological conclusion is drawn from 3 key Bible verses. You have Psalm 2, which kind of questions the ultimate power of earthly nations. Then there's Proverbs 14:34, which offers a path to national success through righteousness. And finally, Matthew 16:18, which promises the ultimate endurance of the church no matter what.
Ultimately, looking at China through this very specific lens, it raises some really complex questions, doesn't it? Questions about the intersection of faith and geopolitics. What it really shows is how a deeply held worldview can provide this powerful, comprehensive framework for interpreting the entire story, past, present, and future of a global superpower.